Hello, and welcome to Exploring History with Crystal and Larry. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Larry.
And we're here today in Sunset Hill Cemetery in Bozeman, Montana. And we're going to be talking today about Daniel Rouse. Now, Daniel Rouse was one of the three people who founded the town of Bozeman, along with William Beale and John Bozeman. And we did a previous episode on Daniel Rouse's early life. And so we're going to do a second episode that kind of talks about his later life. And of course, ultimately his death and burial here in Sunset Hills Cemetery. So Larry, you want to tell us a little bit more about Daniel Rouse?
Yeah, a little bit more about Daniel Rouse, and not far from here, we're at Sunset Hills Cemetery, is the resting place of John Bozeman, and we learned that himself and John Bozeman had a similar childhood in common, in which Daniel Rouse, his father, who's senior, takes the name Daniel as well. He got his father's name in 1852. He died at the California Gold Rush in California. So just like John Bozeman, Daniel Rouse's father left his family, and he had a young family too. Daniel Rouse would have been about 18 at the time that his father left. But his younger brother, Elijah, wouldn't even have been a decade old yet by that time. So himself and John Bozeman must have had a conversation about how they had this similar childhoods where their fathers never came back from the California Gold Rush. Their lives too. They were called by gold. Daniel Rouse, he was a farmer and a prospector and a freighter. And he did a lot of freighting, and that's what he was good at. But for the gold rush, he served as a freighter to move goods. And that's kind of how he made his money off the mining business, to mine the miners, like they all did, and found their way here.
Yeah. So he came to Bozeman, of course, came here in 1864. And we know that he was running a billiards hall in 1869 because there is a business license for that. We also know that in 1880, he was listed as saloon keeper in the census record. So we know he was doing that as well in early Bozeman. But, like all these guys, he had to do lots of different things to bring in enough money to sustain himself and his family. And actually, by this time, he did have a family, because in 1856, Daniel Rouse married a woman whose name was Melissa Wallace. And they got married back in Michigan, where he had been born and raised. And they got married before he actually came west. And their children's names were Wallace, Ida.
Oh, we should recognize Wallace and Ida if you drive around Bozeman.
Yeah, so those are two, Wallace and Ida, and actually Rouse are three street names here in Bozeman. He got married to Melissa in 1856 and had a family, and then left for the West and was here in the West for many years. And I think Melissa kind of got tired of that, and so she actually ended up divorcing him. And so Daniel Rouse then remarried and got married again here in Bozeman to a woman whose name was Susan Hitchcock. And they were married in 1871. And at that time, when he was married, after his marriage, he went back to Michigan and he brought his children back here to Bozeman with him. So he and Susan lived here in Bozeman together. For a couple years, they moved to Florida and lived in Florida, but then came back and lived out their lives here in Bozeman. Susan died in 1898, and she is buried here alongside Daniel. Her headstone is right behind his. And so she died here in 1898. Larry?
His brother had 160 acres east of town here, where Fort Ellis was. And when Fort Ellis moved in, he kind of gave up his 160 acres there. Well, Fort Ellis was built, then seemed to get his acreage back.
So Daniel Rouse actually at one time owned the land we're standing on. He owned this part of the cemetery. But there is another story that we'll tell sometime in the future about a woman whose name was Mary Blackmore. And Mary Blackmore was from England, and she died here in Bozeman. Her and her husband, William Blackmore, had come here to go through Yellowstone National Park in 1872, and she died. And so William Blackmore, being a proper English citizen, asked, well, where is your city cemetery? And I would like to bury my wife there. And they said, oh, well, we just bury everybody up on Daniel Rouse's land on the hill. And he thought that was appalling. So he thought that the city should have a formal cemetery. So he bought 5 acres of land from Daniel Rouse, and he donated that to the city of Bozeman, and so that we could have an official city cemetery. And so now the cemetery that we're standing in is actually owned by the city of Bozeman because of that.
Daniel passed away in 1912.
Yeah. Daniel Rouse was 77 when he passed away, and he was walking through his brother Elijah's farm field, and he must have had a heart attack because they found him a few hours later. It looked like he maybe tripped over a ditch and then fell and died, and they found him a few hours later in the field. When Daniel Rouse died, he may have had a marker, but over time it was lost, something happened, or maybe he never did get a marker. But a few years ago in 1989, a group of Bozeman citizens came together, and they had a celebration on August 9th, which was the 125th anniversary of the founding of Bozeman. And they had a celebration, and they dedicated and erected this monument here on Daniel Rouse, where Daniel Rouse is buried, so that he would have a marker again. And this says, Daniel Elliott Rouse, 1834 to 1912, who with John M. Bozeman and William J. Beale founded the city of Bozeman, August 9th, 1864, placed by the Gallatin County Historical Society, 1989. So what a nice bronze plaque on a piece of petrified wood. So it's a beautiful monument to Daniel Rouse. And thank goodness that in 1989, the Historical Society had a celebration to put this here. There were speeches, there was the dedication of the headstone, and the band, I think, even played it on that day. So a wonderful celebration and placement of Daniel Rouse's headstone. So thanks so much for joining us today on another Exploring History with Crystal and Larry, as we kind of dive into the life of Daniel Elliott Rouse, the 3rd founder of Bozeman, Montana. So if you're enjoying these episodes, make sure to watch more on our YouTube channel, which is Exploring History with Crystal and Larry, and make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. So thanks so much, and have a historic day.
Explore history.